Hi, Kara from Health, Home, and Happiness here. Today we're talking about baby food, and the first foods that I give my children are going to surprise you, but probably what will surprise you even more is that they absolutely love that. So while we talk today, I want to encourage you to put away your biases about what babies will like. They don't need bland rice cereal. And we're going to look into the different nutrients that babies especially need and how to get those from foods that will make such an impact in their lives to come. As you know, our babies are so tiny and they're growing so rapidly, especially around the time that you're introducing the first foods. So their brains are learning tons and tons of new things. Their guts are becoming better able to digest food, and they're going through so many milestones. So today we're going to talk about baby food that is most optimal for gut health, is most optimal for brain development, and most optimal for those quickly growing baby bodies. So the first thing I want to talk about is liver, and this is the first food that I give my babies. This is just a little bit of chicken liver that I have sauteed in a little bit of butter. If your baby is sensitive to milk, then you might want to saute it in a little bit of tallow or coconut oil. I'll show you in another video exactly how I prepare this for my babies and how I store it just in these little, just little pieces of liver for the babies. And then I just pull out about a tablespoon at a time and thaw that and let my baby kind of gum it. Liver is something, if you haven't had it before, the texture is really soft. It's not like muscle meat or even ground beef where there's big chunks that aren't going to be digested well and baby can't really gum to get them soft enough. So liver is something that is soft enough that baby can chew. It is high in vitamin B12, it's high in iron, it's high in D, and it's high in folic acid. And especially the iron and D are something that your pediatrician might recommend your baby supplement. My doctor was perfectly, after giving me a funny look, my doctor was perfectly okay with me giving my baby liver on a 3-time weekly basis or so instead of supplementing him. So liver is a great first food for babies. It has all the nutrients that they need. It's just really a powerhouse, and plus it's so soft that it's really easy for them to digest, because we don't want to have them, because we don't really want them to be eating food like raisins or something. They might like them because they're sweet, but you see them come right back out, and so we know that they're not getting a lot of nutrition from them. But liver is something that my babies have all been able to gum, even if they didn't get their first teeth until later on. They've been able to gum and digest really well. You might be thinking, how do I get my baby to eat liver? I think your baby doesn't have the strong bias that you do. So I have found that babies a lot of times will even like drink salsa, like you put out chips and salsa and suddenly you see your toddler, and this is pretty common, I hear about this in lots of families, so that suddenly you see your toddler going up to the table and just like drinking the salsa out of the bowl, where it might even be like a medium or a hot salsa, and the toddler just doesn't care. Like, babies aren't tasting things the same way that we are. And so we might have that preconceived notion that they need everything bland and sweet and barely tasting like anything, no seasonings and no salt. But actually liver and salt we'll talk about a little bit later. But liver is something that, yes, it tastes strong to us, but to our babies love it. It's almost like they inherently know that they need it. Cod liver oil is another strong tasting food that babies tend to just crave. Like if they need it, they're craving it. I feel like around preschool age, a lot of babies are losing that, where they're not craving the foods that are so good for them anymore. But usually when you're starting solids between 6 months and a year, babies are going to crave and they are going to accept the foods they need, and that includes liver. So I would definitely encourage you to start with liver. Sauerkraut is another strong tasting food that babies tend to love. They love the salty and they love the sour. Your baby, you can just put on a little bit of sauerkraut on a plate or some juice, put a few liver chunks on a plate, and then liberally sprinkle the real sea salt, the salt that still has all those vitamins and minerals and hasn't been cleaned from the sea. And that's going to give the trace iodine, the trace minerals, and the sodium that babies do need for their electrolytes. And the third thing that I recommend you feed your babies is fish roe. And this is salmon eggs, which is fish roe. I buy mine at Vital Choice. It comes in a box like this, frozen with dry ice. You can see those, and then I keep them in the freezer, and then I'll pull them out to thaw in the fridge for about a day before I'm gonna serve them. And I try to use them up within a couple days of getting them out into the freezer. But this is fish roe. And these are salty, they taste a little fishy like we talked about with the cod liver oil. Babies enjoy this. It's almost like they intuitively know what they need, just like you can usually let babies breastfeed on demand and your milk will change according to what the babies need. Babies are just incredibly intuitive. They're not using really the thinking part of their brain yet. They are operating on instinct, which then we outgrow sadly, and things take a lot more thinking. But babies end up loving these salmon eggs, and again, they are nice and soft. They're little tiny finger food. You can put like 3 or 4 of these, and we just start so little. And that's actually another misconception, is people think, oh, well, my baby only eats a couple tablespoons of food a day, so why does it matter what it is? Well, that matters even more. Like, your baby's growing so much, they're only eating a couple tablespoons. We want to make sure that those tablespoons have the most amount possible. So if you can get over your bias, you can see that my children absolutely loved all these things. Like, Levi's eating some steamed green beans and some liver, which for the liver, I just tend to take a couple chunks out of the freezer, let it thaw on a plate, and then give that to him once it's thawed. And he's eating some green beans and he thinks it's the greatest thing ever. So as long as we can get over our biases that babies don't like liver, that salmon eggs are going to be too fishy tasting for them, that this is weird. Your baby doesn't know that any of this is weird. Your baby just kind of has this intuitive sense of what nutrition they need. If they need the vitamin B9, the natural folate, the iron, the B12, the protein, all of that stuff that's in liver, or the omega-3 fatty acids, which is so important for brain health, which is in the fish eggs. The Activator X that Dr. Weston Price talked about in his book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration, is now it's referred to as K2, which is, if you know, the babies are naturally low in vitamin K2, and some people think that that might be a Western phenomenon. And some people think that might be a Western phenomenon because we actually don't include fish eggs in our diet, where in traditional cultures, they knew that they needed to get the eggs from the fish, the liver, and all that stuff that naturally, and the grass-fed butter that naturally has the vitamin K2 in it. And so your baby will benefit from all of these foods. They're amazing for their gut health. They're building their gut lining right now. It's not quite ready, like they can't really digest grains. But the hope is that when we prepare their guts well and we give them all the nourishing foods that help develop a healthy body, a healthy gut, a healthy brain, then they will be able to avoid so many of the chronic diseases that are going around. Lots of people think that it's the vitamin K2 deficiency that's causing so many of the chronic diseases. It's also the lack of natural folate, which I talk about in another video, that we are choosing natural folate that's found in liver instead of artificial folate, folic acid that's found in so many supplements and fortified food. And then next is probiotics, and that's where our sauerkraut can come in, naturally fermented pickles, any natural fermented food. Babies love that sour taste. They really love those strong tastes. So if you can kind of forget everything everyone ever told you about babies need to start with bland rice cereal and think like, my baby naturally has these cravings for these very healthy foods that are needed for their digestive system. And if you don't believe me, go ahead and you can buy naturally fermented sauerkraut at a lot of health food stores now. Bebe's brand is great. Just make sure there's no added sugar. In some of the pickles, there's added sugar, which we don't want to introduce yet. That does not promote a healthy gut. But the naturally fermented sauerkraut, that sour taste, just put a couple of these little cabbage pieces or some of the juice on your baby's high chair tray and see what he does. And my guess is that he's going to love them. He's going to suck on them. He's going to smile. He's going to enjoy this whole process. And my guess is that he's going to love it. So just go ahead and give it a try. See what you think. For the liver, if you don't want to make that baby liver and you just want to give it a little try, go again to your health food store and see if there's a liver pate. And so if there's liver pate, just check the ingredients and make sure there's nothing that you want to avoid for your baby. But a lot of them has just really simple ingredients, and sea salt is good. The herbs and spices are just fine. They're not going to hurt your baby. I would probably avoid milk if there's butter in it. If you haven't introduced milk or you know your child has problems with milk protein, you might want to avoid that. But just give him a little bit on a spoon and see what he thinks. And then for the fish, if you don't want to start with the salmon eggs, just a little bit of salmon, puree that up. like in a blender with a little bit, if you're nursing, a little bit of breast milk or a little bit of water, just to make that a nice paste, and see what your baby thinks about salmon. You want to choose wild caught salmon for that. But that again is available at most health food stores, and even most regular grocery stores have that. Those are the 3 things that I introduce first for my babies. It's a little bit unconventional. Oh, and then these jars, when you're done with these from the salmon eggs, they are perfect baby food jars. So I tend to just fill this up for my little ones, and if I know we're going to be eating while we're out, I'll put in some liver, usually some steamed like green beans or peas or something that's easy for them to pick up, and a little bit of sauerkraut for the probiotics. And that's a great portable solution for when you're out and about, because I know everybody wants to feed the baby. Everybody loves babies. And babies are just, they have that, like, everybody has this drive to want to take care of them. And so many people don't think of food as being a thing that they need, a nutrient. They think of, oh, well, it's okay to give baby ice cream because it's soft and they're not going to choke on it. It's okay to give baby French fries. Baby's going to love French fries. It's easy for them to hold and grasp and chew even without, teeth. And so this is just people's thought process. Sometimes you have to be, it feels almost rude or a little bit assertive and say, no, my baby doesn't eat that. Or if you just say food allergies usually, or the doctor said, usually people will let off a little bit. But that's common, and don't mistake it for somebody trying to give your infant obesity or trying to give them cancer. That's not what it is at all. These people, everybody has this drive in them to take care of babies, and that's just how they are doing it based on their own life experiences. So yes, we choose differently, but it doesn't mean that other people have a malicious intent at all. And along those lines though, people forget, and they don't really usually understand why you're feeding your baby what. It helps to only leave your baby with people that you do trust to follow their food protocols, just because they are building, their brains are developing, their guts are sealing up. This is just a really sensitive time. So it's worth it to maybe offend a couple people, unfortunately, and put in the extra work now so that your baby can have a healthy start without having like sugar that we know harms the immune system. Grains can really, because babies aren't ready to digest them yet, grains can be really hard on their digestive system and prevent that gut from healing and sealing up how it should. Food dyes, obviously we want to avoid those. Food additives, a lot of those haven't been studied, or if they have been studied, they show that they cause neurological issues. We definitely don't want that for our very, very highly sensitive babies as they're growing. But really the hope is that with this good start now, that they're first of all going to avoid the chronic diseases as much as possible. They're going to be able to have a healthy gut, and when you have a healthy gut, you have healthy digestion, and you can extract foods and process out toxins. That's another part of our gut that's so important. And so the hope is that by the time your baby is a little bit older, if they get cake at a birthday party or they're eating unhealthy fats at a restaurant occasionally, that it's not going to give them those health problems that so many of our families and our children are experiencing right now. So that good start is so worth it, that I wanted to just talk about my 3 favorite food for babies. And today we're going to talk about liver, nobody's favorite food. Liver is such a powerhouse of nutrition that I would really like to encourage you to get it into your diet and into your family's diet once a week. And the best way that I have found is to cook up a bunch of it, crumble it, and then you don't need a ton because it is such a nutrient dense food. I'll just put a tablespoon or so in, we do Taco Tuesday, which it's not always tacos. A lot of times it's any kind of Mexican food. So I'll just put the liver in with the ground beef that I'm using or whatever else I'm using, and the strong flavors of the chili powder, the garlic, that kind of thing, it covers it up so well. So that's how we use liver once a week, as I incorporate it into Taco Tuesday. And so that just kind of, it reminds us that we need to be eating that. You can hide liver in meatloaf. I feel like it really needs a lot of garlic to cover it. And so some people will say, yeah, add a tablespoon of liver to whatever ground beef you're using, like meatloaf, or what else do you use ground beef for? Casseroles, that kind of thing. And my kids can usually, did you put liver in this? Yeah, I did. And they'll eat it, but they're not super thrilled about it. But I can hide it in Taco Tuesday and nobody asks. So liver is a powerhouse of nutrition. It has everything that we need that we don't get enough of. It has the Activator X that Weston Price talked about, which is really K2. It has vitamin B9, which is natural folate. It has vitamin B12, which we hear a lot about. When we're low on vitamin B12, a lot of times we're not detoxifying well enough, or a lot of times we have low energy. So if you are having low energy, both the iron, there's a lot of iron in liver, iron and B12, the B vitamins, are all kind of our energy vitamins. And so if you're not feeling a little bit run down, then liver can really help. And it's probably worth it to incorporate this in as many meals as you can, develop a taste for it. But chicken liver is more mild than beef liver, and I'll show you in the video how I'm actually preparing pretty much side by side both beef liver and chicken livers. And so chicken liver, after the soaking step, like we soak it in lemon water. So after the soaking step, it is pretty mild. So here we go into my kitchen, and I will show you how to make chicken liver, and we're doing chicken liver and beef liver today. So the first thing that we do is we thaw our liver. A lot of times it comes frozen because it's not something that a lot of times it comes frozen because it's not something that a lot of people want from the stores. And so these are both organic. You want to get organic, free range, as much as possible. For us, it's easier to find beef in organic grass-fed. I can find pastured chicken liver occasionally, and so when I do, I tend to buy a lot because it's just not as common. Chicken livers obviously are smaller. And so this is chicken liver, are the smaller ones. Beef liver, this is just a slice of beef, which is beef liver, which the beef liver is pretty big. If you want a whole one, like even a lamb liver is really big. So the juice of 1 lemon or half a lemon, and then cover with filtered water. And then we're gonna cover that. So I cover it and then chill it in the fridge in the bowl. So it's soaking in that lemon water, and that's gonna pull out some of the bitterness. It's gonna pull out the rest of the blood. And so this does help it taste a lot better than maybe you've had in the past. And then the next day, after it's soaked overnight, or I wouldn't probably soak it for more than 24 hours, just I'm not sure it's gonna be good. It's probably gonna start to smell funky after that. So we're going to just drain it, we're gonna just drain it. So what I do is I just put a colander in the bottom of the sink, and then I pour the whole thing through the colander, give it a little shake, and then put it back in the bowl while I'm waiting for the pan to heat up to fry it. So then to cook it, really any skillet is fine. Put a little fat in the bottom. I like butter. If you can tolerate butter, that's great. Ghee is probably even better because it doesn't have those milk proteins that sometimes burn. A little bit of tallow or even coconut oil is fine. And so heat that over medium-high heat, and you're cooking it almost like a steak. And so once the pan is hot, that oil is hot, just go ahead and put your liver in. For the chicken livers, you want them to be in a single layer. So you might have to do 2 batches depending on how many you had. And then cook that for a few minutes on each side. You can and then once you flip it the first time, I like to just add a little bit of salt to it. I tend to just salt everything, and I feel like that kind of gets in through the meat since you're salting it as it cooks. Really optional, so just sprinkle a little sea salt on if you want, probably about half a teaspoon for this whole pan full of liver. And then you know it's done. You can cut into it a little bit, especially since we're not serving it whole. We're gonna be chopping it up anyway. So you can cut into it, and I like the inside to be a little bit pink. If you cook it until the whole thing is brown, it does get a little bit more tough, especially if you're gonna make a pate out of it and you want that flavor. Just the inside can be a little bit pink on both the chicken and the beef liver. And you can kind of feel it, especially the beef liver, and it'll feel firm. Instead of squishy. Like it's squishy when you're putting it in the pan, and then it's firm when it's done. And so you can just check, remove it from heat, allow it to cool. And then I personally chop it up into little tiny pieces, about the size of what ground beef would be. And then I flash freeze it, which means I freeze it in a single layer overnight. And then once it's been frozen in that single layer, once it's been frozen in that single layer, it's easy to just pick up the parchment paper, or if you didn't use parchment paper, just kind of scrape it off whatever you froze it onto, and then you can pull out as much as you need. So if I'm giving it to a baby, I just pull out about a tablespoon at a time and allow that to thaw. If I'm just gonna throw it in some tacos, I'll pull out like a couple tablespoons and throw it into my taco meat. You just kind of can pull out super you can super easily pull out as much as you need without it freezing into one big block. And then you can freeze it in whatever container you want. Again, I do use plastic, so I tend to just put it in a freezer bag, Pyrex with a lid. Pyrex with a lid, or you can even put it in a mason jar with a lid if you prefer to use glass. And then I think it lasts in the freezer without tasting freezer burnt about 6 months. And so I try to use it within 6 months or cook up as much as I'm going to use in 6 months. So I have 3 children, and as I talked about in my baby led weaning and how we start solids video, my babies all loved liver. Like inherently, when they're just using their intuition, they know this is a really good food for them. So it's the first food that I start my babies on, but we'll just assume that you don't have babies, or maybe you want to eat liver yourself. And so you can make it into a pate, and I really like the chicken liver pate. So after the soaking step, it is pretty mild. And so if I'm making fried chicken, like I'll sort of, with my chicken pieces, I'll cut up a few pieces of chicken liver and I'll just add those in with the fried chicken. My kids love fried chicken. Of course, who doesn't? But my kids love fried chicken. And so adding some liver in with that and say, okay, well, here's the fried liver part. And it's fried the same way. It has the same breading as the regular chicken. And the chicken liver is pretty mild. So they will eat the chicken livers and then they get the chicken muscle meat after that that's been fried. And frying is, for me, I don't mind my children eating fried chicken at all. I fry it in healthy coconut oil, and I usually do either a gluten-free breading, or you can use tapioca flour, that works really well. Or if you're on the GAPS diet, an almond flour or a coconut flour, kind of a mixture of both. It works okay. It will get into your frying oil a little bit more. Fried chicken is something that I don't mind my kids having, but it makes a huge mess. It's like a time-consuming process, and it makes a huge mess with the oil splatters and stuff. So it's really a special occasion treat. My kids often request it for their birthday dinners. And so while I'm in there, if I already have some chicken liver, like I tend to soak a bunch of it at once, which you'll see in the video. And then I don't cook all that at once. I'll just freeze it after I've done the whole water and lemon juice step. I'll freeze that so that if I am making chicken or fried chicken or something like that I can use the chicken liver in, then I'll just pull out some of that to use in there as well. And then the last thing that liver is great for is it's super economical. So this beef liver costs, like you can see how big this is, and it costs probably $5 at the most, but it just has like tons and tons of those nutrients in it. Chicken liver is about the same way. So if you feel like, ooh, I can't really afford to have tons of meat, tons of protein for my family, liver is a great way to get the extra nutrition at a super low cost. And then lastly, I want to talk about toxins in liver. So it's kind of a common misconception that the liver stores toxins. The liver doesn't store toxins, it neutralizes toxins. So no, you're not ingesting all of the toxins that cow took in. It doesn't store toxins in the liver. It neutralizes toxins, like the liver secretes stuff, enzymes and whatnot, that neutralizes those toxins, and then it is processed out of the cow. So yes, you do want to choose liver from a healthy animal, but you want to choose really any meat from a healthy animal. But no, you're not going to get a big dose of toxins from eating liver. A couple more things. So kosher, we used to keep kosher, we don't anymore, but kosher, and for some reason, I occasionally get comments that, is liver kosher? Yes. If you eat beef liver and chicken liver, those are both kosher. And no, it's not blood. It's not a sack full of blood. So the stuff that you see, the red stuff coming out of the liver as we cook it, we've already soaked out all the blood. We removed all the blood before we cook it. And the red stuff that you see coming out is the same as what's in steaks. And I can't remember what it's called. I think it's albumin. But no, it's not blood. It is red, yes, but it's not blood that you're seeing come out of the liver as we cook it. So how do you know if your baby is ready for solids? And to sum it up, if my baby is sitting on my lap, takes a bite of my food, and then swallows it, I assume they are ready for solids. So I personally use the baby-led weaning approach to starting solids and seeing kind of where they are developmentally and whether they are ready for solids or not. And then as we get into more solids, I definitely do a parent-led eating approach, which is I choose
what is served at the table, and I choose the order that it is served in, and it is not really up for discussion, though I do keep their individual needs in mind and their individual preferences in mind as well. So for developmental milestones, and this is part of the baby-led weaning, which is kind of a set of guidelines for when you start solids, and that is that children can sit unassisted. They have teeth, which is thought that there's an enzyme associated with teething, that once the first tooth erupts through, the child has that enzyme, is actually able to digest more of their food, which we know digestion starts in the mouth with saliva, breaking down the nutrients. And so until that first tooth erupts, which can be at varying times for different children, from like 4 months until 14 months, it's a big variety of when children first get their first teeth. It's thought that once that first tooth erupts, maybe start paying attention and seeing if your child is ready, displaying other readiness signs for solids. And then having the grasp where they can pinch things between their first finger and their thumb. And so that's another developmental milestone that kind of indicates, based on this philosophy of when to start solids, that your child is ready for solids. So once they're hitting some of those milestones or all of those milestones, you might just want to see if they start taking food and swallowing it off of your plate. And this is a great time, parents, for you to clean up what's on your plate. I recommend avoiding grains, which even includes rice, even that famous rice cereal, and focusing on produce and protein, egg yolks if your baby tolerates eggs, dairy if your baby tolerates dairy. Those are all very nutrient dense things, and if you can make your plates full of those kind of foods, then just sort of allowing a baby who is sitting on your lap anyway to sort of see what looks interesting to them. They're all good nutrient dense options, and so we can kind of give them a little bit of freedom. As they're eating more and when they're ready to sit on their own in a high chair, I really like the high chairs that are adjustable, so their knees can be at a 90-degree angle. And once their knees are at a 90-degree angle, their trunk is stabilized and they're able to focus on the fine motor skills associated with eating, which eating is not only a nutritional thing, it's also a social activity, sitting at the family table, engaging in conversation, listening to the conversation around them. And it's a motor skill activity for our little ones as they're growing and learning so much. So they'll be mimicking you. They probably will want to have their own little individual plates, individual forks and spoons, even if they're not using them efficiently yet. It's a great thing to let them know that, yes, I'm providing you with these little tiny utensils because I have faith that you will learn how to use them eventually, and they'll want to experiment trying to copy you as you eat your food. And then once we've transitioned to having them at a high chair, I tend to be more in charge of what they eat when. So I'll put usually protein and vegetables down on their plate first, just 1 or 2 bites, and salt it sort of to their taste based on what they enjoy. And then once they've eaten those protein and vegetables, offer more if they want more. And if not, then that's when we follow up with something sweeter like a fruit or an applesauce, that sort of thing. So less preferred, more nutrient-dense foods first, and then the sweeter, more favored foods in the end. And this will just help you sort of set a pattern for, this is what we eat. We eat the stuff that we need to grow first, and then the stuff that we enjoy more. And this is a great way to sort of prevent picky eating from even starting. I know that there's a lot of parents now that want to do the intuitive eating. They want to do intuitive eating with their children, and I've just found that having a parent-centered or a parent-directed approach works a lot better for my children. The intuitive eating might have been really helpful when we were eating all those Frankenfoods, the packaged foods, and kids were not getting the nutrients that they needed, and so their body was starving for nutrients. But in general, if you allow your children to pick what they eat, they're going to choose simple sugars and starchy foods, and they're probably not going to get the balanced nutrition that they need. So just having this very pleasant, very matter-of-fact, like, we are going to eat this and then we will eat that approach can kind of go a long way into solving the picky eating that tends to pop up, not so much in 1 and 2-year-olds, but 3 and 4 preschool age tend to get quite picky, even if before they ate everything and absolutely loved it. So your mileage will vary. This is what we do, and I've had 3 children. I have very good eaters now, but I do have a more parent-centered approach than is kind of popular in the United States at this particular time. So that's how we do parent-led meal times. As I'm introducing solids, I tend to let my children breastfeed on demand while we're home. Once they're about 18 months or so, when they're not infants anymore and they're walking around, I don't nurse in public a whole lot, but I do let them sort of nurse at will at home. And that's kind of how I can accommodate for them knowing what they need and knowing how often they need to eat without me having to go and make them whatever they're asking for every 10 minutes. So breastfeeding on demand is sort of what I use instead of snacking. And then I will cover in another video why we don't snack and how my children, even starting at 2 or 3, like when they wean is when they start going 4 to 6 hours between meal times. And this seems to work really well for them. They are hungry at meals, they expect their meals, they eat really well, and then they have tons of time and attention to go play. So I think we're finding that a lot of kids, when they're sort of eating on demand all the time and snacking all the time, every time there's a struggle or a little bit of boredom, children sometimes are tending to go use a snack to alleviate that boredom. And that's something that just as parents, you might not agree with my particular way of doing this, but it's something to be aware of, that if you find that your child can't tolerate boredom and they're asking for snacks and you feel like all you're doing all day is providing snacks and cleaning up snacks, and you can't go do an activity for an hour or two without your child feeling like they need food, then sort of eliminating snacking is really common in other parts of the world. It's just not common in America right now. The book French Kids Eat Everything goes more into the cultural differences between not snacking and how children are definitely able to go hours at a time without snacking. But then, like I said, when they're super young, that's when I just use breastfeeding on demand. Very easy, portable source of not only nutrition that children need, but also comfort and avoidance of overstimulation. If they're getting overstimulated and just need some contact and closeness with mom, breastfeeding provides all of that. And sort of as they naturally wean, I let my children wean sort of on their own. Then that they just transition into eating 3 meals a day and finding other ways to get that contact and closeness from you.
I have 3 amazing eaters now. I'm really happy with how I started solids with all 3 of them. I feel like for me it was the least stressful way to start, and it really just kind of set them up with good habits. So thanks for watching, and I will be back soon.